Huge tension at Mercedes after leaked conversation. So we're going to be going through that and 3 other stories in today's video. So make sure to like this video, and if you want more Mercedes news content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting that red button down below. The first story is Toto Wolff exposes Lewis Hamilton's hypocrisy that was leaked after strange behavior at the Chinese GP. Relationships seem to be worsening within Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, who had affirmed after his Ferrari announcement that he would be 100% committed to progressing with the Silver Arrows in 2024, no longer appears to be as invested. The W15's performance is degrading, and the 7-time champ hit rock bottom at the Chinese Grand Prix qualifying, getting knocked out in Q1. Following that, Toto Wolff harshly criticized Hamilton's decisions. The Austrian has even doubted his departing driver's commitment to the team. In 2024, Hamilton hasn't been as quick as his teammate George Russell. Former F1 driver David Coulthard attributed this lack of pace to him being on the back foot because he was mentally already at Ferrari. Soon after, Hamilton issued a fresh statement to reassure Toto Wolff and Mercedes about his commitment. "I'm 100% a Mercedes driver right now, and that's my only focus this year," he said. "I don't want it to be distracting me from doing the job for this team. I want to finish on a high." Though Russell has publicly backed Hamilton against Coulthard's claim, the same cannot be said about Wolff. The Mercedes TP has noticed an unusual change in his champion driver's behavior. Despite their terrible performances, Hamilton appears to be smiling, as if he's accepted his fate for this year. "Lewis is in a surprisingly good mood," Wolff told Service TV, as quoted by Formula Passion. "I don't know if it's the knowledge that he will go somewhere else next year. But it's not like him at all," he concluded, doubting Hamilton's commitment after the Chinese GP. Coulthard's views seem to have rubbed on Wolff as well. As for Hamilton, his team boss's statements have created a new facet of questioning, apart from people doubting his Ferrari move. In nearly every race weekend, Hamilton has fielded questions regarding his Ferrari move. While some were worth answering, a journalist got on his nerves at the Japanese GP with an ill-timed question that brought out his pent-up frustration. Ahead of the Chinese GP, the 7-time champion finally ended all bizarre questioning with a stern statement. "I don't feel like I need my decision vindicating," Hamilton told reporters in China of his Ferrari move. "I know what was right for me, and that hasn't changed since the moment that I made the decision. There's not been a moment where I questioned it, and I'm not swayed by other people's comments. Even today, there's people continuing to talk stuff, and it will continue on for the rest of the year. It is ironic how drivers are expected to behave professionally, but people interacting with them don't often do so." However, for Hamilton, what Wolff thinks does matter. He still has 19 more races to compete in with the W15 under him. What do you think of Wolff's stance on his driver's behavior? Toto Wolff has been warned against bringing a new car design chief despite Mercedes' ongoing problems. For 8 successive seasons, Mercedes were the cream of the crop. But that changed in 2022 when a new set of technical regulations came into force and the Silver Arrows pursued the wrong developmental direction. Instead, Red Bull got the jump on all their rivals and have been F1's dominant force since. With the performance gap still so large, it seems likely that Max Verstappen and his team will be the class of the field until the next major rule change in 2026. Mercedes have, like the rest of the grid, been unable to take the fight to Red Bull. But, while others such as Ferrari, McLaren, and Aston Martin have been able to make notable progress, Wolff's team continues to struggle to find the right setup for its cars. There were high hopes for this season's W15, but it has so far proven to be just as temperamental as its predecessors. Even James Allison's return to the technical director role has not led to any significant progress being made. Yet, there has been virtually no talk of Allison's role being at risk, despite the design department not delivering what Mercedes need. And according to the BBC, replacing one of his top deputies is not likely to be something that Wolff considers. And correspondent Andrew Benson told the Checkered Flag podcast that the paddock would react with shock if Wolff did decide to make such a change. He said, "The issue isn't a management issue, it's a technical understanding issue. Is not designing the car, the issue is the car design." Now, so that then passes the question on to the technical department. Are they going to make changes there? Maybe, but are they likely to replace James Allison as technical director? I'd be absolutely dumbstruck if they did. The second story is Mercedes F1 experiments have gone too far. Lewis Hamilton's admission that he mistakenly drove extreme setup changes at the Chinese Grand Prix is part of Mercedes's Formula One team admitting it needs to focus on the basics. Whether at the team's behest or in the case of Hamilton a driver's own direction, there have been many instances in the last 2 and a bit years of Hamilton or sometimes George Russell putting volatile performance swings down to variants of setup experiments. It has tended to be Hamilton. For a while, that was put down to him helping the team explore its troubled car's setup windows in an attempt to unlock something. This year, Hamilton has steered into trouble himself. He has admitted as much. After qualifying and finishing second in the sprint in Shanghai last weekend, Hamilton started only 18th for the main race after an error in qualifying and then struggled throughout the Grand Prix before rising into the points with a late flourish. It prompted a lighthearted, self-effacing remark from Hamilton on the cool-down lap when he said, "We won't make that setup change again, Bono. That was my bad." That was not the only time Hamilton held his hands up during the weekend. After the sprint, he had already indicated he had driven some sizable setup changes, then post-race admitted he paid the price and planned to make sure I don't do that in the future. Senior Mercedes figures Toto Wolff and Andrew Shovlin backed the sentiment that extensive changes had been made, and not for the better. Wolff called it a difficult car to drive and set up, and that Hamilton's car in particular was far away from the optimal. In Mercedes' official press release, he was surprisingly blunt about it from a team perspective. "We must make sure that we are not trying to find a silver bullet each weekend when it comes to how we run the car," said Wolff. "We made too many extreme changes after the sprint, and that made the most important part of the weekend much more challenging." On balance, this weekend was about what can be expected from Mercedes, in that between the two cars they probably achieved about as much as possible. Hamilton massively overperformed in sprint qualifying, took great advantage of the wet, and showed anyone who doubts whether he's got the ability or the interest that he certainly does. And when that car has track position, it can run competitively somewhere in that group of cars with Ferrari, McLaren, and Aston Martin. Hamilton was at the very upper end of what that car can achieve on Saturday. But in qualifying and Sunday's race, Russell was the one who got the most out of the car, and that, if starting from behind, equates to no more than sniping to beat the aforementioned rivals if any of them underachieve. So, this was not a bad reaction from team or driver to one misstep. It addressed a trend in the early races of perhaps overreaching at times. Mercedes is fourth best, at best, and that has led to chasing too much on setup and then playing catch-up through the rest of the weekend or locking in changes for vital sessions that cannot be undone and then have to be lived with. The third story is Russell issues a clear warning to Mercedes. After the recent appearance in Shanghai, it is evident to George Russell that Mercedes must take significant steps in the factory to improve their performance. With the current package, it is unlikely that the Silver Arrows will be able to achieve much more than 6th place in the upcoming Grand Prix in China. Russell had identified the race as a good way to determine his position in advance. The appearance in the Middle Kingdom gave the Mercedes driver information, although perhaps not quite the one he had hoped for. It was a good weekend in the sense that we had this format and were able to try a lot of different things between the two races, says Russell, referring to the weekend sprint. However, the performance in both races was very similar. We must now return to the factory to address the fundamental issues, which include increasing downforce on the car. After his exit in SQ2, the sprint presented significant challenges for Russell from the outset. However, he still managed to secure an honorary point for 8th place. Things improved slightly in the race, with the Brit still finishing 6th. The team's experimentation with the setup during the China weekend did not affect Mercedes' position in the chasing field. It was a valuable learning experience because we had 2 different setups this weekend, but both produced similar lap times and performances, reveals Russell. The Brits' conclusion: the work must now continue in the factory, because the bottom line in Formula One is that the more downforce you have, the faster you will be. The setup is then just the cherry on the cake. Mercedes driver Russell believes that downforce is the key to success. Regarding his downforce thesis, Russell adds, "I think we understand enough now to know that we need to add downforce." We've changed the philosophy and the concept a few times over the last 2 years. My personal opinion is that regardless of the concept, the most important thing is to have as much downforce as possible. Once you have that, you can then worry about the limitations. According to Russell, there is no single solution. We just have to keep adding up performance and concentrate on the basics, like the wind tunnel and the downforce in the CFD data. Sometimes it might be that simple. Mercedes is already implementing new updates in Miami. Russell notes, "We'll see what we can do with it." However, he adds, Red Bull is still ahead of the competition. We have their true potential here. For example, in the sprint, Verstappen comfortably took a second off everyone. We shouldn't fool ourselves. Mercedes' chief engineer Andrew Shovlin is also unsurprised by the ongoing difficulties and the large gap to Red Bull.